Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Ertem. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan earlier this year visited Iraq for the first time since 2011. The historic visit focused on improving relations and highlighted joint action against terrorism. But how did the two countries end up here? And now that their mutual neighbor Syria has been freed from the Assad regime, how crucial has it become for Ankara and Baghdad to work together? Zeynep Gökçe has this report.
A very important visit. That's how Iraqi media described Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's tour in the country in April. While he made deals with the government in Baghdad, Erdogan also went to Erbil to hold talks at the capital of the semi-autonomous Kurdish regional government. But this rapprochement with Baghdad was the result of a long series of meetings between Turkish and Iraqi officials for nearly a year. Relations had been strained because of the Turkish military's operations against the PKK terror group in northern Iraq. Baghdad had protested the airstrikes, while Ankara said it was responding to cross-border attacks and going after PKK terrorists dug deep inside mountain hideouts. Now, the neighbors are finally on the same page, with Baghdad also declaring the PKK a banned organization.
We discussed the steps that can be taken against the PKK and its extensions, which are targeting Turkey from Iraqi territory. We are pleased that it was declared a banned organization.
We persist in not allowing any force to use Iraqi territory as a launchpad for aggression against neighboring countries, just as we sanctify our land and do not allow any aggression against Iraqi sovereignty.
The leaders also smoothed over water and oil issues, while they vowed to boost cooperation in many other fields. They signed 26 agreements, with the highlight being the Development Road project. This $17 billion trade corridor is set to connect the Gulf to Europe via Iraq and Turkey through railways, roads and ports. While this project has been gaining momentum, in August, Ankara and Baghdad also signed new deals, including one to set up 2 military centers to fight terror. Since October, Turkey has intensified its operations in Syria and Iraq after 5 people were killed in a terrorist attack on one of its key defense companies. And now Ankara expects Baghdad will follow its lead and that of other countries, including the UK and US, and deem the PKK a terrorist organization. The mending of ties between Turkey and Iraq comes at a time when tensions across the Middle East could boil into an all-out regional war. And now that Syrian opposition forces have ended the former Assad regime's 24-year rule, how will this impact an already fractured region? Zeynep Gökçe, Straight Talk.
For more on the deeper cooperation between the two neighbors, joining me now from Ankara is Omer Ozkizilcik. He's a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. From Istanbul, Helin Ertem, an associate professor at Istanbul Medeniyet University. And from London, Afzal Ashraf, visiting fellow in international relations and security at Loughborough University. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me now. Before we open this conversation, I think it's important to have a baseline of the security threat. Omer, what's the current situation right now in Turkey's counterterrorism efforts against the PKK?
So when we speak about Iraq in particular, the situation is that Turkey's counterterrorism in northern Iraq have been progressing for years now. We see that each year with the beginning of spring, that the Turkish armed force, accompanied by the Kurdish Peshmerga forces, are advancing and cleaning several caves and training grounds of the PKK in the mountainous regions of northern Iraq. As the terrain is quite difficult, we see every year a bit of a progress, but it takes time. And as of now, it can be assessed that largely or almost entirely, the PKK's presence alongside the Turkish-Iraqi border has been cleaned. Now, the only remaining PKK's presence are small hideouts region and mountainous regions which are far further away from the Turkish border, like the Gara Mountains, the Sinjar Mountains, or the Kandil Mountains, which is the headquarters of the PKK, and is partially located inside Iran as well. And the Turkish counterterrorism operations have been progressing so well so far due to the change of the Turkish tactic in combating terrorism in the cross-border and in employing Turkish drones, which gave area surveillance superiority to the Turkish armed forces, and establishing Turkish military bases and checkpoints in support and logistical support from the Kurdish Peshmerga forces.
Helin, it's been since 2011 the last time Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan visited Iraq, so a very important visit earlier this year. How do you view that relationship? Is it ready to handle a security challenge together?
Well, I think there's been quite amount of progress in mutual relations with Iraq. There have been problems in the past regarding the oil transfer, oil trade from Iraqi territories to Turkey. But I guess two governments have already overcome many of the problems regarding the oil transfer or oil trade. In this situation, especially in the recent relationship between Turkey and Iraq, what we see is that both countries are coming closer to each other and understanding that trade and security are interconnected. If we can move on and make a progress in security area, we can especially have benefits on the trade and finance area as well. So regarding the development road, which is going to be built in a near future, I think both countries have already understood that they have to somehow build a win-win approach and somehow get rid of the security challenges in the area, primarily the PKK terrorism especially, let's say. And if they can overcome that, both sides can have many to win regarding the trade and finance partnership.
Ashraf, same question to you. How does the relationship look like from the other side of the border? And very recently, the PKK has been called a banned organization. What exactly does that status mean? And how should the Turks perceive that status?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that status is a political fudge between what the Turkey government wants, and that is that the PKK should be labeled a terrorist organization, as it has been by the USA, the UK, and many other countries. I think the Iraqis have a political challenge. I think my impression is that they're genuine about wanting to cooperate with Turkey. They're genuine about wanting to limit the PKK's operations from their territory. But they do have a significant Kurdish minority within Iraq. And I think it's all a question of making sure the labeling doesn't attach itself to the majority of the Kurdish population in Iraq, which has nothing to do with the PKK or any form of terrorism. But it is a political issue. And I think, as with all political and diplomatic negotiations, it's a step-by-step process. My understanding is that a banned organization is exactly that. It is banned within Iraq, but labeling it a terrorist organization allows it to be dealt with internationally in certain respects. So it's only it's a bit of a diplomatic and legal fudge here. And my impression is that if the negotiations continue in the way they are progressively, they will accept that label eventually.
Omer, Iraq is a very complex country. In the north, you have the Kurds, and even within the Kurdish area, you have Erbil and you have Süleymaniye, very different views. Inside the central government and the rest of Iraq, you have the Shiite element, you have Sunni Arabs, many different allegiances. How hard is it going to be for Turkey to navigate amongst these many players if they want to increase their security relationship with the central government and the Kurdish regional government?
So we have to see clearly that it's more difficult to establish a broader cooperation with Baghdad rather than with Erbil. And this has the main reason for that is the role of Iran. We have seen that after the Turkish-Iran agreed to enhance the cooperation, that Iran supplied the PKK with anti-drone missiles and with technology to shut down Turkish drones in northern Iraq. And we have seen so far no real and major action by the Iraqi army against the PKK's presence in the Sinjar mountain region, which they could have been, but unfortunately, due to the presence of Iran-backed Shia militias and especially some units within the Hashd-e-Shaabi militia, that has not been progressed. And we can here clearly assess that the Turkish approach towards Iraq is also an approach not only limited with PKK, but also with trying to empower Baghdad and the Iraqis themselves to emancipate themselves from Iran, as well as to be a sovereign in Iraq. And we have here to see as well towards the Kurdish region of Iraq. And inside this region, we see that Erbil is quite closely aligning itself with Turkey. We have seen that Nahchivan Barzani has repeatedly called for the PKK to leave northern Iraq. But on the other side, when it comes to the Soleimani, we see that Taliban especially is increasing its relationship with the Syrian branch of the PKK, which also has its effects on the relationship between the PKK and the PUK, the Soleimani Kurdish government. And therefore, it's a complex situation in Iraq, but we see that Turkey has two main partners. One is the Baghdad government, and the second is the government in Erbil. And Turkey is trying to increase the sovereignty of Iraq by fighting the PKK.
Helin, Omer is saying that Iran could play a spoiler in Turkey's counterterrorism efforts. How do you see Iran's presence in Iraq, or the Shiite presence in Iraq? How much does it complicate the situation for Turkey and for Iraq?
Oh, well, it's totally a kind of complex interdependency situation, what we are observing in the region. So there are so many actors, the states as actors, the officially declared actors of the region, but at the same time, so many proxy forces, non-state actors, which are mainly armed actors, and they are destabilizing the region especially, which is a very significant security problem, both for Baghdad and for the Iraqi Kurdish administration in the north of Iraq. So these are very important issues. And Iran, unfortunately, in the past has been a kind of destabilizing force by using these proxy forces, the Shia elements, especially inside Iraq. What Turkey is underlining from time to time is that Turkey is there in the Iraqi soil because of military issues, due to self-defense principle of the United Nations, Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. So if the terrorism continues, Turkey will continue to be in the Iraqi soil. But this is also a kind of a threat, let's say, sometimes for Iran as well, because Iran wants to be the sole foreign power, let's say, inside Iraqi territories by using the Shia population. And if Turkey is there with military elements, this is somehow threatening Iranian interests in the region. I think there has to be a kind of common sense among all these partners to reach a kind of compromise, because if there is no security, then there is no win-win approach. If there is no security, then this is a destabilized Iraq, which cannot continue. An unstable Iraq is a threat both for Iran, for Turkey, for Syria, and for the whole region. For that reason, I guess all countries should sit and negotiate regarding the continuation of Iraq's stability to reach a kind of understanding, common understanding, to move towards the win-win approach rather than threatening each other's national security interests, let's say.
Mm-hmm. You know, Ashraf, earlier, Helin mentioned the Development Road Project, and this is a project that I closely follow as well. It seems like a tremendously important trade route that will probably be used a lot in the future. Security for that road, for that logistic trade route, is going to be very important. How do you view this issue with the PKK? Also, obviously, counterterrorism efforts against Daesh, any Al-Qaeda elements as well, working with the Development Road Project and having the Turks partner up on security?
But what Helin just said at the end, I think, is key to this, and it's a good segue to the question you want to answer, and that is about stability. Stability is in the interest of all of the players in the region, but it is instability is something that outside people can exploit. And I think we're going to come on to that. The geopolitics of this situation does benefit others. You're absolutely right. This corridor is an exciting one and potentially very beneficial for everybody in the region. It's about 1,200 kilometers of railway road from Basra all the way up north to Turkey, shortening distances. And you said about security. Well, before we look at the security in detail, it is actually an alternative to the possible insecurity and the delays and costs involved in using the sea lanes. As you know, those have been from time to time under threat because of wars and other things. So there is a security balance here. The ISIS and other terrorist movements have used these corridors and threatened them as a way of putting pressure on governments. We see this evolving as we speak in what is known as the CPAC. That's the Chinese economic corridor with Pakistan all the way down to their port in Gwadar, and separatists are occasionally carrying out attacks along that route. So far, they haven't done anything that stopped the route. They've damaged things, and I think we might find similar sort of thing in Iraq until Iraq becomes more stable and those terrorist and separatist organizations are reduced. They might never be totally eliminated, but reduced in effectiveness. But certainly a proportion of the funding, and I think it's about 17 billion, I think, that's afforded to this, ought to go on security. And there are security models from Pakistan and other similar corridors that can be adapted, not adopted, because what works in one region doesn't work in another, but they can be adapted in a very cost-effective way to make this corridor viable. And as has already been pointed out by the colleagues in this discussion, it is something that I think will benefit the region as a whole, not just Iraq and Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Okay. January 20th, a new dynamic is coming to the region, and something that's probably definitely going to impact Iraq's security situation and probably Turkish-Iraqi relations as well. Donald J. Trump, president-elect, will be inaugurated. Now, during his previous administration, IRGC commander Qasem Soleimani was assassinated on Iraqi soil. We've seen a lot of tit-for-tats between the U.S. and Iran on Iraqi soil as well. I want to hear your answers across the board on what you think the impact of Trump will be on Iraq's security and on this cooperation between Turkey and Iraq. Omer, beginning with you.
Yeah, first of all, we have to remind ourselves that no one can really expect what Trump will do. And that's actually what makes his foreign policy's main essence to be unforeseeable. And however, forming some forecasts, I can assess that probably Trump will focus on his anti-Iranian alliance and try to reforge the alliance between Arab states and Israel under the odds. And once he deals with the situation in Gaza and Lebanon, that he will focus on Syria and Iraq and to minimize and limit the Iranian presence there and to empower especially the Iraqi central government against Iran. And for that, I think the Turkish and American approach towards Iraq to empower the people who are elected by the Iraqi people, to empower the government who are elected by the Iraqi people, who have a democratic consensus against people who have their arms in their hands, against people who work for foreign countries, against militia, their interests not in Iraq, but in some other capitals.
Mm-hmm. Helin, Trump's coming back. Is that good or bad for Iraq in the Iraqi-Turkish relationship?
Well, we cannot know for sure, but I think we can estimate, make a kind of guess about possible moves, that he's a very pragmatic person. So I guess it won't be bad. What he wants, and also the previous governments, no matter which party they are coming from, either Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. The United States is somehow trying to remote control the region. So for them, in the last 2 decades, let's say, it's important for the regional countries to deal with their own problems. So I do not expect Trump to be somehow in a position of making military intervention to the region. This will somehow increase the burden of the United States, especially economically, and in terms of global status and image of the country. What Trump might do is to give many more responsibilities to the regional countries to deal with their own problems. He would want stability. He would want more trade and understanding, common understanding with the region. The only problem is about Israel and the continuing fight, Israel's unfortunate fight against the Palestinian people. We are expecting something positive, which is very difficult, I know, but if this instability regarding the Israeli-Palestinian issue continues, I think Trump's position in Iraq, Syria, and even in Iran would be something very difficult. What I do expect is for sure to have a kind of increasing relationship between Turkey and the United States in the Trump administration, which might bring some surprise moves regarding the fight against PYD and YPG and PKK issues in the region.
Ashraf, should Iraq brace for or embrace a Trump administration?
Well, I think it should try to embrace it, but I think it will have to brace against it because whilst President Trump, I think he's genuine in wanting not to have war, the assumption that he makes is that you can prevent war, particularly with Iran, from a position of strength. And in that case, I think he feels he must flex some muscles. The other thing, I think this is not just Trump, but I think the government in the United States as a whole is behind the development and changes that are taking place, the geopolitical changes that are taking place within the Middle East, the rapprochement that the Chinese have brokered between Iran and some of the Gulf states, particularly Saudi Arabia and other things. I don't think they have fully understood that the world isn't what it was even 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. And the credibility that the United States has lost in the last few years, over the last couple of years or so, over the Palestinian issue, is significant. And so my worry is this, that in order to put Iran back in its box, so to speak, President Trump might feel that he ought to show a little bit of muscle. And of course, we know from recent events that Iran will not take that lying down. It will need to respond, and we could very easily have an unstable situation. And we can't talk about the region without talking about the very complex interdependencies that exist with the conflict in Ukraine and with other issues such as energy and the economy. And the problem I think we have, particularly with President Trump's presidency, is that he is a man of ideas. He likes to make bold claims, but he doesn't always deliver on them, or he can't deliver on them. For example, before his first presidency, he said he would have a wall with Mexico, and he'll get the Mexican government to pay for it. Of course, that didn't happen. He said he would ban all Muslims. He ended up banning a travel ban for just a few minor countries. So the point I'm trying to make here is that he is not necessarily going to actually deliver what he wants to deliver. And his recent promise that he's going to sack a great many of the people in charge of government departments. He's going to relocate those government departments to federal locations. All of this is going to cause enormous disruption in the United States' ability to bring policies to fruition, to implement policies. So I think if there is a word that describes President Trump as an individual and his style of governance and what he will deliver, it's disruption. I think that's all we can say for sure. We can pray that it will be better than recent events, but I can't be sure it will. It might actually end up without his intention to make things worse.
Ashraf, Helin, Omer, thank you for helping me unpack a complicated and complex security situation in the Middle East. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aaron. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.